Dr. Finton Solace tapped on the cracked glass of his helmet with a weary sigh. You'd think a trillion-credit project could afford a helmet that doesn't double as a goddamn fishbowl. His voice crackled over the comms, distorted by the static that never quite went away. Even in the most advanced quarantine zone Mars could offer, technology was only as good as its last maintenance check, which was probably sometime during the Jurassic period. "I told you to stop headbutting the equipment," came the dry reply from his assistant, Yuri Pricey Harlan. The nickname wasn't just a poorly veiled critique of his salary. It was a reminder that a PhD didn't guarantee brains. "We've got bigger problems than your ugly mug, Doc. Like the fact that the aliens are breathing down our necks with all the subtlety of a drunken rhino." "Relax," Solace replied, peering through the murky Martian dust at the alien fleet hovering ominously on the horizon. "We're on the brink of a breakthrough that'll make this all worth it." Probably. The quarantine zone was a mess of red dust and over-engineered structures that looked like they were designed by someone who'd lost a bet. It wasn't exactly home, but it was the kind of place that grew on you, like a fungus. Finton glanced around at the makeshift lab, a collection of mismatched equipment and jury-rigged tech that could either save humanity or blow them all to hell. The jury was still out. "Still trying to figure out if we're the saviors of mankind or just idiots with good PR," Yuri muttered as he tinkered with a device that looked suspiciously like a microwave. Knowing Yuri, it was probably a doomsday weapon in disguise, or a new way to make popcorn. "You wound me, Pricey," Solace said, flashing a grin that was all teeth and no heart. "I prefer to think of us as pioneers. Like Columbus, but less genocide. Why?" The air in the dome was thin, and not just because the oxygen recyclers were barely functioning. It was the kind of tension that made you feel like you were in a bad horror movie, where the monster could pop out at any moment, and it was usually wearing a lab coat. "So, what's the plan, Chief?" Yuri inquired, a hint of sarcasm playing at the edges of his voice. "We gonna sit here and hope the aliens decide to join a knitting circle instead of wiping us out?" "Oh, ye of little faith," Solace chided, watching as a small group of Martian dust devils swirled lazily outside the dome. "We've got the Dreamscape tech nearly operational. All we need is one successful test and we might just turn the tide." "Might. That's comforting." "In the same way a parachute might work," Yuri retorted, glancing at the readouts on their makeshift Dreamscape terminal, a cobbled-together contraption that looked like a blender mated with a 3D printer. Solace shrugged. "Progress isn't made by the cautious, my dear Pricey. It's made by the insane, and possibly the dead. But mostly the insane." As they spoke, the alien fleet loomed closer, their ships casting shadows over the Martian surface like a celestial eclipse of doom. They had arrived weeks ago, a conglomerate of different species with a singular purpose: to claim Mars for themselves. And considering their armada was larger than any high school teacher's disappointment in their students, they were doing a pretty good job. "Think they'll send a welcoming committee?" Yuri asked, feigning innocence. "I hope so," Solace replied, his tone all bravado. "I've got a speech planned about how they can stick their invasion up their intergalactic arse." "Inspirational," Yuri deadpanned. "Let's hope they understand sarcasm." Finton turned back to the Dreamscape terminal, the key to humanity's last stand or its last mistake. It was a peculiar piece of technology, designed to project the human mind into a shared consciousness, a battlefield of thoughts and dreams. The idea was simple: if you can think, you can fight. The execution, however, was about as straightforward as explaining quantum physics to a toddler. "Incoming transmission," Yuri announced, his eyes glued to the screen. "Our friends upstairs want a progress report." "Should I tell them we're busy knitting ponchos?" "Tell them we're on the verge of something big," Solace instructed, though he couldn't quite keep the doubt from his voice. "And that they should hold their horses or tentacles or whatever the hell they have." As Yuri relayed the message, Solace's mind wandered to the invention itself. The Dreamscape technology wasn't just a weapon, it was a gamble. a way to put humanity's fate in the hands of the collective unconscious, a place where nightmares were just as real as dreams. You ever think we're in over our heads? Yuri asked, his voice tinged with a rare moment of sincerity. Every day, Solace admitted. But if we don't try, we're already dead. And I'd rather go down swinging than sitting on my arse waiting for the end. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken fears, the kind that gnawed at the edges of sanity. Solace shook it off, focusing instead on the task at hand. "Let's run another test," he said, injecting a false note of confidence into his words. "If this doesn't work, we can always offer the aliens a free subscription to Earth's reality TV." "That might scare them off," Yuri snorted. "Last I checked, they have standards, or at least a sense of self-preservation." As they prepared the terminal for another test, the airlock hissed open, admitting a gust of cold Martian air and a figure wrapped in a heavy environmental suit. "Dr. Solace," the newcomer greeted, their voice muffled by the helmet. "Command needs an update." "And you are?" Solace asked, not bothering to hide his irritation. "Our new babysitter, advisor," the figure corrected, pulling off their helmet to reveal a face that was all angles and sharp edges. "Dara Quinn, I've been assigned to ensure your project doesn't implode in spectacular fashion." "Nice to know they have faith in us," Solace replied, though his eyes were already back on the terminal. "We're almost ready for a test run. Care to witness history in the making?" "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Quinn replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just make sure it's the kind of history we want to remember." With everything set, Solace took a deep breath and initiated the test sequence. The terminal hummed to life, a low thrum that vibrated through the floor and up his spine. It was the sound of potential, of a future that could go either way. "Initiating dreamscape projection," Yuri announced, his fingers dancing over the controls with practiced ease. "Let's see if we can kick some alien butt in our sleep." The room was tense, a silent prayer hanging in the air as the terminal reached full power. For a moment, it seemed to work. The display flickered with images, thoughts and impressions spilling out like a dam breaking free. Then it all went dark. "Ah, crap," Yuri muttered, slamming his fist against the terminal. "We blew a circuit again." "Is this part of the plan?" Quinn asked, one eyebrow raised in an expression of mild disdain. "Part of the process," Solace corrected, though his frustration was evident. "We're close. I can feel it. Feels like we're about to blow ourselves to kingdom come," Yuri added, already prying open a panel to assess the damage. Solace sighed, rubbing his temples. "One step forward, two steps back. Story of my life." "You'll get it," Quinn said, almost kindly. "Or you'll die trying. Either way, it'll make for a good read in the history books." "True," Solace conceded, managing a wry smile. "They always say the best stories come from the people who didn't survive to tell them." The airlock hissed again, this time admitting a cold breeze that carried the distant rumble of alien engines. The fleet was advancing, a slow, inexorable march toward oblivion. "Time's running out, Doc," Yuri said, voice tight with urgency. "We need that breakthrough." "I know," Solace replied, his gaze fixed on the dreamscape terminal as though sheer willpower could make it work. "And we'll get it, or we'll die trying." The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of equipment and the distant roar of the alien fleet. Mars was a harsh mistress, but it was humanity's last hope. And as Solace stared out at the red planet, he couldn't help but wonder if they'd make it through, or if they'd be just another failed experiment in the annals of time. For now, all they could do was try, and hope that their dreams could shape reality before their nightmares consumed them. Dr. Finton Solace hated mornings. Not because of the Martian sunrise, which was just as disappointing as anything else in his life, but because it meant another day of trying not to die. The quarantine zone, with its half-assed defenses and over-engineered structures, was as close to home as any fungus-covered rock could be. And today, that home felt particularly doomed. "Are you sure this thing won't just blow up in our faces?" Yuri Pricey Harlan asked, as he poked at a bundle of wires like a kid poking a dead rat with a stick. Solace, squinting at the crack in his helmet, shrugged. Only one way to find out, Pricey. Science is about taking risks, and occasionally those risks lead to crispy fried scientists. Great motto for your memoirs, Doc. Die trying, the Finton Solace story. Yuri wasn't wrong. The dreamscape technology was a gamble with odds worse than a rigged Martian roulette. But when the alternative was an alien fleet ready to turn Mars into a glorified barbecue pit, well, desperate times called for desperate and possibly idiotic measures. The comms crackled, spitting static like a cat hacking up a hairball. Doctor. Solace, this is Dara Quinn. We've got movement from the aliens. Looks like they're gearing up for more than just a sightseeing tour. Of course they are, Solace muttered, dragging his eyes away from the terminal's blinking lights. They've obviously just heard about our legendary hospitality. Should I prepare the welcome punch? Yuri deadpanned. Nothing says please don't kill us like a good fruit blend. Only if it's spiked, Quinn replied over comms, deadpan sarcasm a match for Yuri. Yuri adjusted his makeshift welding goggles and went back to tinkering, his expression one of grim determination or constipation. It was hard to tell. Solace, for his part, could feel the pressure mounting like a bad itch you couldn't quite scratch. The aliens weren't just breathing down their necks anymore. They were practically making out with their collars. And then there was Commander Xylith. The alien leader had made his intentions about as subtle as a chainsaw in a library. He wanted the dreamscape tech, and he wasn't planning on asking nicely. Any word from our interstellar buddy, Xylith? Solace asked, his tone light but his mind heavy with dread. Nothing yet, Quinn replied, though I'm sure he's cooking up something charming, maybe a card that says sorry for your impending doom. Thoughtful, Yuri chimed in. But I doubt Hallmark makes cards for planetary invasions. The alien fleet, a mass of sleek, metallic nightmares, hovered on the horizon like vultures waiting for the last heartbeat. Each ship was a testament to alien engineering and a big middle finger to human ingenuity. For every rickety bolt and duct-taped wire in Solace's lab, the aliens had a counterpoint of polished chrome and deadly efficiency. We need progress, Solace. Quinn's voice was a thin veneer of calm over a pit of urgency. Otherwise, this experiment of yours will be our epitaph. We're working on it, Solace replied, though the words felt as hollow as the promises of a two-credit politician. Yuri, let's run the diagnostics again. There's got to be something we're missing. Like a will to live, Yuri quipped, but he was already flipping switches, his fingers moving with the kind of urgency that came from the promise of dire consequences. The dreamscape terminal emitted a low whine, which was either a good sign or a really bad one. It was hard to tell with jury-rigged tech that could double as a set piece for a low-budget sci-fi flick. Initiating another test, Yuri announced, his voice steady despite the tension thick enough to cut with a knife, and probably botch the job. The terminal's screens burst to life, flickering with abstract lines and shapes that defied logic. It was like staring into a digital kaleidoscope. Symbols danced and merged, forming patterns that were as mesmerizing as they were baffling. Looks like we've found the universe's most complicated screensaver, Yuri commented. Keep it running, Solace instructed, the words a command, a plea, and a prayer all at once. For a fleeting heartbeat, the images stabilized, coalescing into something almost comprehensible. A shared consciousness, a network of minds interlinked by threads of thought and imagination. The dreamscape was more than just an idea, it was alive, pulsating with the potential for salvation or destruction. Then, the terminal sputtered, coughing up sparks and smoke like an angry dragon with indigestion. The flicker of hope died as quickly as it had ignited, leaving only the acrid stench of burnt circuitry and dashed dreams. Well, that was anticlimactic, Yuri remarked, waving away the smoke. We'll get it right, Solace insisted, though his optimism was hanging by a thread thinner than a Martian atmosphere. We have to. Quinn's voice cut in, crackling through the comms. I suggest you hurry. Xylith's ships are moving into formation. They're preparing for a breach. Wonderful, Yuri muttered. Nothing like an impending alien invasion to really light a fire under your ass. Solace felt the weight of the world, not Earth, but this dusty, inhospitable rock, pressing down on him. Every second lost was another step closer to annihilation. But giving up wasn't an option, not when the dreamscape tech was their only hope. "Let's try rerouting the power," Solace suggested, his tone all business despite the pressure. "Maybe we're not feeding it enough juice. Or maybe it's just hungry for something we can't give," Yuri replied, but he was already pulling out a tangle of wires, his hands moving with a speed born of necessity. As they worked, the alien fleet continued its inexorable advance, each ship a harbinger of impending doom. Commander Xylith's intentions were as clear as the void of space: take the tech or take them out, preferably both. "Any bright ideas for stalling the aliens?" Solace asked, sparing a glance at Quinn. "I'm open to suggestions," she replied. "Maybe you can offer them a tour of the dome, show them how not to maintain a quarantine zone." "Funny," Solace said. "I was thinking we could invite them to a Martian beach party." Too bad we forgot the sand. The bleak humor was a thin shield, but it was all they had. That and the dreamscape tech, which was currently about as useful as a chocolate teapot. "We'll figure it out," Solace promised, more to himself than anyone else. "We have to." The Martian wind howled outside, a banshee's wail echoing through the dome. It was a fitting soundtrack for their tale of impending disaster. The aliens were coming, driven by a purpose as cold and relentless as the vacuum of space. But as Solace stared at the tangle of wires and the flickering screens, he felt a flicker of defiance. They might be outgunned and outnumbered, but they weren't out of options. Not yet. "Time to think outside the box," Solace said, determination hardening his voice. "Let's try linking the dreamscape to the mainframe. If we can amplify the signal, we might just get this jalopy off the ground," Yuri finished, a spark of hope lighting his eyes. Together, they worked in a frenzy, fingers flying over keys, connecting wires, recalibrating, and praying to whatever deities governed the cosmos. It was a mess of brilliant improvisation and sheer lunacy, the kind of mad science that wouldn't be out of place in a cautionary tale. The terminal hummed to life once more, its screens flickering with an intensity that spoke of raw power barely contained. The dreamscape was online, a digital frontier ripe for exploration or exploitation. "Running diagnostics," Yuri announced, the words laced with a caution born of experience. The data streamed across the screens, numbers and symbols dancing in a chaotic symphony. The dreamscape was more than just a battlefield. It was a canvas, a realm shaped by thought and imagination. "We've got it," Solace breathed, the realization leaving him dizzy. "We finally—" His triumph was cut short as the comms crackled, Quinn's voice urgent. "Xylith's ships are moving in. They're going to breach." "Time to test our handiwork," Solace replied, determination and fear mixing in equal measure. "Yuri, let's show them what humans are made of." "Stubbornness and caffeine," Yuri suggested, but he was already preparing the interface. As the alien ships approached, their silhouettes stark against the Martian sky, Solace felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the moment that would define them for better or worse. The dreamscape terminal buzzed, power thrumming through its circuits, ready to unleash its potential. It was a gamble, a leap into the unknown, but it was all they had. "Engaging dreamscape," Solace commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Let's give them a proper Martian welcome." As the dreamscape activated, the familiar world of the lab fell away, replaced by the shared consciousness of humanity's last stand. It was a realm of endless possibilities and terrible dangers. Here, thoughts were weapons and dreams had the power to reshape reality. It was time to fight. In the dreamscape, Solace stood on the precipice of a digital battlefield, the landscape shifting and warping with the collective will of those connected. Here, he was more than just a weary scientist. He was a warrior, armed with the power of imagination. Yuri appeared beside him, his usual sardonic expression replaced by one of focused determination. "Let's see if we can give Xylith a run for his money. Or at least make him think twice before declaring victory," Solace agreed, steeling himself for what lay ahead. The alien presence was a palpable force, a dark cloud looming over the dreamscape. Xylith's mind touched theirs, a cold, calculating intellect probing for weaknesses. "You think you can defeat us with dreams?" Xylith's voice echoed, dripping with derision. "We are reality, you are but fleeting thoughts." "Then let's make those thoughts count," Solace shot back, rallying the human consciousness against the alien threat. As dreamscape warriors, they charged into the fray, wielding mental constructs like weapons. It was a battle unlike any other, where imagination was the ultimate arsenal. The alien forces retaliated, their presence a relentless tide threatening to overwhelm. But Solace and his team fought on, driven by a determination that defied the odds. In this realm, they were more than human. They were hope incarnate, fighting not just for survival, but for the right to dream. And as the clash of wills raged on, Solace knew that the outcome would shape the fate of Mars, and perhaps all of humanity. The battle for the dreamscape had begun. The dreamscape was up and running, which was a miracle in itself given it was powered by the Martian equivalent of duct tape and wishful thinking. Dr. Finton Solace, standing in this digital expanse, felt the weight of his leadership pressing down like a leaden cloak. Nothing like impending doom to make you question every life choice that led you to a planet where the sun rises like a disinterested employee showing up late to work. "You ever think about how we got here, Yuri?" Solace asked, watching their data constructs materialize like digital phantoms in the dreamscape. His tone was casual, as if they were just two old friends discussing anything but the end of the world. Yuri, fiddling with a holographic panel that seemed more intent on displaying the universe's most abstract screensaver rather than any useful information, snorted. "Got a bingo card for that one. Let's see. Dumb luck, bad decisions, and a penchant for sci-fi novels. Tick them off, and here we are on Mars playing hero with tech that's more temperamental than my ex." "Would have thought your ex would have less chance of exploding," Solace replied dryly, watching as the alien presence in the dreamscape began to probe their defenses, like a curious child with a very sharp stick. "Debatable," Yuri grinned, though his eyes were fixed on the shifting data, wary of any sudden surprises. "She could spark a fight faster than I can say I'm sorry." A tense silence settled in, broken only by the low hum of electricity coursing through their makeshift setup. Each flicker of the terminal was a reminder of just how tenuous their grasp on survival was. "Quinn," Solace said, speaking into the comms with a calmness that belied his internal turmoil, "what's Xylith's status?" "Still advancing," Quinn replied, her voice crackling over the static like a ghost. "And I've got a lovely view of their latest strategy. They're splitting into 2 flotillas." "Great," Yuri muttered. "It's like dealing with cockroaches. Stamp one out and 3 more take its place." Solace wiped a hand over his face, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "We need to buy more time. Any ideas?" Quinn's pause was long enough for Solace to picture her looking out over the red Martian wasteland, probably with an expression that could curdle milk. "I could try lobbing insults at them. Maybe they'll be too offended to attack." Yuri chuckled. "That's worth a shot. Just remember to aim for the ego. Aliens are suckers for that." Solace knew the jokes were a coping mechanism, a way to ward off the creeping sense of impending doom. But humor only went so far when you were staring down the barrel, or whatever equivalent aliens used, of obliteration. "Let's get back to it," Solace said, clapping Yuri on the shoulder. "If we can amplify the signal, maybe we can screw with their systems, cause a little chaos. A classic if we can't win, at least take them down with a strategy," Yuri said, grinning like a man with nothing left to lose. Always a crowd pleaser. They worked in tandem, minds dancing across the digital landscape, manipulating the dreamscape's potential. It was like trying to build a sandcastle during high tide, every step forward threatened by the relentless pull of unforeseen complications. "Solace," Quinn cut in again, urgency sharpening her voice. "I'm spotting movement near the quarantine perimeter. Seems Xylith's not just sending ships, they've got ground units mobilizing." Of course they do, Solace muttered, rubbing his temples. As if we didn't have enough to worry about. Maybe they heard about Martian hospitality, Yuri tossed in, not missing a beat. Though I doubt they're here for the room service, or lack thereof, Solace added. All right, Quinn, monitor the situation, see if you can spot any weaknesses. We'll keep working on our end. The dreamscape continued to shift under their control, a digital battlefield where thought became reality. Yet despite the chaos, there was an odd familiarity to it all, a sense of belonging in the midst of madness. Funny, isn't it? Yuri said, not taking his eyes off the data. How desperation breeds creativity. I mean, when's the last time we had to invent our way out of annihilation? Last Tuesday, if memory serves, Solace replied. Right after we discovered the coffee supply had run out. The absurdity of their situation was almost comforting, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, they were still human, flawed, stubborn, and irreverent to the end. All right, let's give this another shot, Solace said, his fingers dancing over the controls, amplifying the signal now. Let's see if we can scramble their systems. As they worked, the dreamscape pulsed with energy, the digital constructs shimmering with potential. It was a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, and for once, the humans were the ones holding the cheese. Signals boosted, Yuri confirmed, eyeing the data with cautious optimism. Let's see if we can cause a little havoc. In the dreamscape, their efforts manifested as a wave, a surge of power aimed directly at Xylith's forces. It was a gamble, but if it worked, it might just buy them the time they desperately needed. The alien presence recoiled at the onslaught, a ripple of confusion spreading through their ranks. Even in the digital realm, chaos reigned supreme, and for a brief, shining moment, humanity had the upper hand. Looks like we've got their attention, Solace said, a hint of satisfaction coloring his words. Now let's see if we can keep it. As the aliens scrambled to adapt to this unexpected turn of events, Solace could almost hear the distant sound of Quinn chuckling through the comms. It was a small victory, but in a war fought on the knife's edge, every little win counted. Ground units are hesitating, Quinn reported, her voice barely containing the hint of a smile. You might have actually bought us some breathing room. Glad to be of service, Yuri quipped. Who knew waving a digital stick could work so well? Stick or not, we've still got work to do, Solace reminded them. Let's not get cocky. The Martian wind continued its mournful howl outside the dome, a relentless reminder of the desolate world they called home. Yet within the quarantine zone, a spark of hope flickered to life, defying the oppressive weight of reality. Quinn, keep us posted on any developments, Solace instructed, turning his attention back to the dreamscape. We'll keep tweaking the system, see if we can hold them off a little longer. Roger that, she replied. I'll keep looking for ways to make their day worse. Music to my ears, Yuri grinned, already elbow-deep in the digital chaos, fingers flying with practiced ease. Let's see if we can't give them a headache they won't forget. As they worked, Solace couldn't help but feel a strange calm settle over him. It was the calm of a man who knew his fate rested not just in technology, but in the indomitable spirit of those who refused to give up. So, Yuri said, breaking the silence with his usual irreverence, what do you think we'll do if we actually make it through this alive? Solace pondered the question, a wry smile tugging at his lips. I'd say a vacation, but I hear the beaches here are overrated. True, Yuri agreed. Besides, I've always wanted to see if I could build a sandcastle on Earth, somewhere with actual sand. Ambitious, Solace chuckled. But let's focus on surviving first, one hurdle at a time. Their banter was a lifeline, a thread of normalcy in a world turned upside down. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, humor and hope could shine through, lighting the way forward. The dreamscape continued to shift and change under their influence, a testament to human ingenuity and defiance. And as the battle raged on, Solace knew that while they might be outmatched, they would never be outwitted. Hope was a fragile thing, but as long as they had it, they had a fighting chance. And for Solace, that was more than enough. Let's show these aliens what we're made of, Solace said, determination stealing his voice. Amen to that, Yuri replied, his grin a challenge to the universe itself. Time to kick some extraterrestrial ass. As the dreamscape surged with power, Solace felt a sense of purpose reignite within him. They were fighting not just for survival, but for the right to dream, to imagine, to exist. And in the end, that was a battle worth fighting. Dr. Finton Solace stared at the mess of wires that claimed to be a control panel, suspicion curling in his gut like a bad hangover. This was the heartbeat of their makeshift defense, the glorified pile of junk that stood between them and the loving embrace of an alien apocalypse. And it was definitely in need of a defibrillator. Yuri, Solace began, trying to keep the rising panic from his voice, have you checked the diagnostics on this thing lately? Yuri, ever the optimist in a world gone to hell, was sprawled under the console. His feet stuck out like some kind of bizarre offering to the gods of technology. If by checked you mean kicked it and swore at it, then yes, thoroughly. Fantastic, Solace replied, rubbing his temples. I think we might have a slight problem. Yuri's head popped up, hair sticking out at angles that defied physics. You don't say, on Mars. In a quarantine zone with a shelf life shorter than my last relationship. Shocking. Less sarcasm, more solutions, Solace snapped, though his tone lacked real bite. He was too busy watching the feed from the dreamscape flicker ominously. Something was off, and he had a sinking feeling it wasn't just the usual Martian malaise. All right, hand me the flux recalibrator, Yuri said, waving a hand without looking up. Let's see if we can unbugger this before we get vaporized. Solace grabbed what he hoped was the right tool from the workbench, which was more a graveyard of failed inventions and half-empty coffee cups than a space for scientific breakthroughs. Here, and for the record, I still say this is a terrible idea. Noted, Yuri said, taking the tool and diving back under the console. But considering our options boil down to try something stupid or roll over and die, I'll take stupid any day. The lights above flickered in agreement, or perhaps warning. The quarantine zone was a place where optimism went to die, yet somehow they were still here, clinging to hope like barnacles on a sinking ship. Quinn, Solace called over the comms, what's the current status on Xylith's flotillas? Still advancing, still menacing, and still ugly as sin, her voice crackled back, full of dry wit. Ground units are getting cozy outside the perimeter too. Maybe they're planning a surprise party. Surprise parties and alien invasions, Yuri muttered from under the console. They both leave a mess, but only one involves tentacles. They're not going to give us time to sweep the floors afterward, Solace retorted, eyeing the fluctuating data stream like it might attack him next. We need to kick this into overdrive or we're toast. Yuri's muffled curse was a testament to how well things were going under there. Bloody things got more gremlins than the last time I tried dating. But if I can reroute this power conduit, we might get a bit more juice. Juice is good, Solace said. Juice means chaos, and chaos means they might hesitate. A spark flew from under the console, accompanied by a yelp from Yuri. Ah, there it is, the sweet taste of potential electrocution. Just don't fry yourself before dinner, Solace advised dryly. I'd hate to eat alone. Your concern is touching, Yuri grumbled, but the flickering screen soon stabilized, the storm of alien data settling into something vaguely comprehensible. There, that should give us a little more oomph. Solace glanced at the feed. The dreamscape pulsed with renewed vigor, its simulated landscape bristling with digital defenses. It was a fragile shield, a spider's web strung between them and annihilation, but it was something. Looks like we might just hold together, Solace mused, hopeful despite the odds. Not to jinx it, Yuri said, sitting up and wiping sweat and grease from his forehead with a grimy sleeve, but should we maybe revisit the Plan B list? You know, in case this glorious piece of engineering decides to implode. Plan B? Solace chuckled darkly. You mean hope they develop a sudden allergy to red dust? Exactly, Yuri agreed. Or maybe they'll get tired and decide to conquer a planet with better weather. Quinn, Solace called over the comms again, tone all business. Any sign of a breach in our defenses? Not yet, she replied, the words laced with both relief and tension. But we can't count on this holding forever. Forever's a long time, Yuri said, his tone almost wistful. Let's just aim for the next 10 minutes. Sounds like a plan, Solace nodded, although planning seemed more like an academic exercise these days. If we can maintain this wave, we might just keep them at arm's length. The dreamscape flickered, shifting as the alien forces pressed against its boundaries. It was a dance of ones and zeros, a battlefield where the rules were written on the fly. And at that moment, Solace felt a begrudging admiration for the ingenuity that had brought them here, even if it did feel like the universe's most elaborate suicide mission. All right, let's keep this thing running, Solace said, returning to his work. Every second we delay them is a second closer to finding a real solution, or at least a distraction, Yuri added, checking the panel for any more surprises. Maybe they'll get bored and wander off. Unlikely, Solace replied, though a part of him wished for such a convenient miracle. But we can hope. The comms crackled again, Quinn's voice cutting through the static. Heads up, gentlemen. Looks like they're trying something new. Aerial units are coordinating with the ground forces. Because why not pile more problems on us? Yuri sighed, glancing at Solace. We really need to start charging for this kind of entertainment. Solace frowned, fingers tapping a staccato rhythm on the console as he thought. All right, if they're coordinating, we need to disrupt it. Sever the connection between the air and ground units. Easier said than done, of course. Disrupting alien communications was akin to asking a cat to stop knocking things off a table, possible, but not without consequences. Yuri nodded, tuning into their shared wavelength. All right, let's see if we can scramble their signals. Make them feel like they're driving blind. Quinn, Solace instructed, keep an eye on any changes in their movement patterns. Let us know if they start behaving like they've lost their GPS. Will do, she replied. And hey, if this works, maybe we can sell the tech to the highest bidder. Once we're not, dead. Always looking on the bright side, Yuri said with a grin. But let's not count our chickens before the aliens cook him. The console hummed with energy, the dreamscape becoming a blur of activity as they launched their digital counteroffensive. It was a calculated risk, but in a universe where survival hinged on the whims of fate and faulty wiring, risks were all they had. As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the room was palpable. Each flicker of the screen, each beep and whir of machinery was a reminder of the thin line they walked between victory and oblivion. Anything? Solace asked, voice tight with anticipation. Yuri strained to decipher the incoming data, his brow furrowed. Looks like. Yes, we've got them. Their formations are breaking up. It's chaos out there. Solace allowed himself a tight smile, though it was laced with the knowledge that such victories were fleeting. Yet in the face of insurmountable odds, they had managed to claw back some semblance of control. Quinn, he called. Status update. Ground units are stalling, she confirmed. And the aerial units are having a hell of a time coordinating. Whatever you did, it's working. I'll take that as a victory, Yuri said, leaning back with a sigh of relief. Small, but still a win. Small victories add up, Solace replied. And right now, it's enough. The dreamscape continued to pulse under their influence, its simulated world a testament to human defiance. It was a thin shield, but as long as it held, they had a chance. All right, Solace said, feeling the weight of leadership settle on his shoulders once more. Let's keep this momentum. We've bought some time, but we can't squander it. Time's a luxury, Yuri agreed. And speaking of, I'd kill for a few more hours of sleep. Sleep's overrated, Solace retorted. Especially when we're about to become a footnote in an alien conquest manual. Dark, Yuri chuckled. Even for you. Just trying to keep it realistic, Solace replied, though there was a hint of amusement in his tone. All right, team, let's get back to work. The clock's ticking and we've got one hell of a show to put on. With renewed determination, they plunged back into the chaos, hands steady even as the world crumbled around them. It was a strange comfort to know that despite the odds, they had each other. In a universe that seemed intent on their destruction, they were a testament to resilience, a flawed, irreverent, and downright stubborn refusal to give up. And in the end, that was the kind of hope they could believe in. Doctor. Finton Solace rubbed his eyes, which felt like they were trying to crawl out of his skull. He'd put them back in if he had to, but right now he had bigger problems. The quarantine zone on Mars was on the brink, and he was pretty sure the only thing holding it together was a shared hatred of Xylith and Coffalace desperation. Any other bright ideas? Solace asked, flicking through screens that looked more like a child's finger painting than tactical data. Yuri Pricey Harlan was scrunched up under the console again, looking like a man who'd lost a fight with a spaghetti monster made of wires. I was thinking we could pray, but I'm not sure which god covers alien apocalypse insurance. Probably the same one that handles accidental electrocution, Solace replied, kicking a cable out of his path. Let's just hope they're listening. Hope's in short supply, boss, Yuri muttered, adjusting his glasses that had slipped down his nose with a grease-stained finger. You know, kind of like a decent meal or functioning technology. He had a point. The quarantine zone was more of a mausoleum than a sanctuary, its walls echoing with the sound of impending doom. The makeshift lab equipment was a testament to human ingenuity or desperation. Mostly desperation if Solace was honest. Quinn, any updates from our tentacled friends? Solace asked into his comms, trying to sound more optimistic than he felt. It was a fine line between hope and insanity. Quinn's voice crackled through the static, as comforting as nails on a chalkboard. They're repositioning. Looks like they're finally getting serious about tearing us to pieces. Lovely, Solace sighed, rolling a kink out of his neck. I was just thinking we needed more excitement. Yeah, Quinn shot back, her sarcasm a balm on his weary nerves. I was getting bored with the usual existential dread. Yuri sighed from beneath the console, his voice muffled. Someone should really teach these aliens about subtler approaches. Maybe a postcard next time, right? Solace agreed. Dear Earthlings, wish you were here, but since you are, we'll just kill you instead. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the hum of overworked machinery and the occasional creak of the structure settling around them. Solace knew it was bad when even the walls sounded like they were groaning in pain. You know, I always imagined my end would be a bit more glamorous, Yuri remarked, emerging from the console like a mechanic from under a particularly angry car. A bit less. Dusty, if it's any consolation, Solace said, looking at the grime on Yuri's hands. I don't think anyone's going to care what you look like when you're dead. Comforting. The screen in front of Solace flickered, displaying the alien flotillas advancing like a relentless tide. It was hard not to feel like a bug in front of a lawnmower, small, insignificant, about to be squashed. All right, let's focus, Solace said, trying to muster some semblance of authority. Ideas. We need ideas. Yuri scratched his head, leaving a streak of grease through his hair that made him look a bit like a punk rock scientist. We could always try the classic let's pretend we're already dead maneuver. Might work, Solace chuckled grimly. Except they seem hell-bent on making sure. Quinn, Yuri called, any chance of, I don't know, a miraculous rescue? Not unless you've got a hotline to a superhero, she replied. Because right now it's just us and them. Great, Yuri muttered. Guess I'll have to delay my plans to become a Martian hermit. The dreamscape continued its digital dance of survival, a fragile play of colors and numbers that could collapse with a sneeze. Solace watched it like a father watching his child play on a cliff edge, the tension twisting his gut. Okay, what about a glorified distraction? Solace suggested. Something to pull their attention away, even for a moment. Yuri pondered this, apparently considering the logistics of suicide missions versus just plain suicide. Could work, but we'd need bait. And I'm fresh out of sacrificial lambs. Well, I'm not volunteering, Solace said. I've grown attached to living. Could have fooled me, Yuri smirked. You look like a man who's been trying to die of caffeine poisoning, true, Solace admitted. But if I go, I'd rather it's not at the hands of something with more arms than a cuttlefish. Quinn's voice interrupted their morbid brainstorming. If you're done planning your funerals, I might have something. There's a weak point in their formation. We could exploit it, make them scatter. Solace's eyes narrowed as he considered the possibilities. And how do you propose we do that? Remember that flux recalibrator, she suggested. I'm thinking we could rig it to overload. Big boom, lots of confusion. Ah, a classic blow something up solution, Yuri grinned. Always a crowd pleaser. Right, Solace agreed, his mind rapidly assembling the pieces. But we'll need to make sure we're not in the way when it goes off. I'm not keen on becoming part of the Martian surface. Details, Yuri waved a hand dismissively. We'll figure it out. Good, because I'm not keen on joining the list of heroes that died in stupid ways, Solace said, rubbing his temples. We'll need to move fast. They're not going to give us a second chance, Quinn, Yuri called. You got eyes on their response times. We need to know how fast we need to skedaddle. Fast, she confirmed. Like we left the oven on fast. Great, Solace muttered. Why does everything around here have to be done at a sprint? Because it keeps us fit, Yuri suggested. Gotta burn off all that space food somehow. True, Solace conceded. But I was hoping for a bit more time to work out a real plan. You know, one that doesn't involve us getting incinerated. Too late for that, Yuri replied. We're in it now. The dreamscape pulsed with renewed vigor, as if it understood their desperation and was eager to play its part. Solace felt a flicker of hope, a candle in the storm, as they prepared for their mad dash against the odds. All right, Solace said, steeling himself. Let's get this over with before I change my mind. Don't worry, Yuri reassured him. You'll be too busy running to rethink it. Solace gave him a wan smile. Comforting. With a shared look that spoke volumes, they set to work, moving with the frantic energy of men on borrowed time. The equipment hummed under their touch, the dreamscape a blur of activity as they prepared their final gamble. As he worked, Solace couldn't help but marvel at the audacity of it all. Here they were, two humans against an alien threat vast enough to swallow worlds, armed only with wits and a penchant for reckless abandon. All right, I think that's it, Yuri announced, wiping sweat and grime from his brow. We're as ready as we'll ever be. Good, Solace replied, heart pounding with adrenaline. Now let's go make a mess they won't forget. Quinn's voice crackled over the comms, a final reassurance as they prepared themselves mentally for what lay ahead. I'll keep you posted. And don't do anything too stupid. Too late for that, Solace chuckled darkly. But thanks for the concern. With one last look at the flickering screens, they turned to face the door, the path ahead a gauntlet of uncertainty and danger. But as they stepped forward, a strange calm settled over Solace, a quiet acceptance that whatever happened next, they were going to give it their all. No regrets? Yuri asked, his voice light despite the gravity of their situation. Plenty, Solace replied, but nothing that matters right now. Good, Yuri grinned. Because I'd hate for you to die with a complaint on your lips. As if that would stop me, Solace shot back, pushing open the door and stepping into the unknown. The corridor stretched before them, a narrow path of dim lights and claustrophobic walls leading to their uncertain future. But as they moved, Solace couldn't help but feel a surge of reckless defiance. Let's go show them what humans are made of, he said, a fierce determination in his voice. Mostly water, last I checked, Yuri replied, but there was a fire in his eyes, a shared defiance that burned bright against the encroaching darkness. Together they strode forward, two figures against the tide, ready to face whatever came next with a mixture of courage, desperation, and a healthy dose of gallows humor. In a universe determined to break them, they would stand unyielding, a testament to human tenacity and the irrepressible spirit that refused to fade quietly into the night. And in the end, that would have to be enough. Doctor. Finton Solace peered at the holographic panel, its abstract screensavers mocking him with their uselessness. It was like trying to read tea leaves in a hurricane. Next to him, Yuri Pricey Harlan was tinkering with the flux recalibrator, his grease-stained fingers dancing over the wires with all the precision of a drunk octopus. "Remind me again why we didn't sign up for that cushy research gig on Europa," Yuri asked, not looking up. "Because we have a penchant for existential crises and crappy surroundings," Solace replied, rubbing the bridge of his nose where his helmet left a constant indent. He could still feel the cracks spiderwebbing across the glass of it, a constant reminder that technology here was hanging by a thread. "Ah, right, that old chestnut," Yuri nodded, as a shower of sparks erupted from the recalibrator. "Well, here's the good news. We've got about a 50-50 chance of this thing not exploding in our faces." 50-50. "Those odds are practically a sure thing around here," Solace said, watching a tendril of smoke spiral up toward the ceiling. Quinn's voice crackled through the comms like a disgruntled banshee. "You boys planning on doing anything useful today or just giving the aliens a light show?" "Hey, this is all part of the plan," Yuri shot back. "We figured we'd throw in a little pyrotechnics before the main event. Just make sure it doesn't go off while I'm talking to you," Quinn retorted. "I'd hate to have to cover your funerals too." "Don't worry," Solace chimed in. "We can't afford funerals. We'll just be part of the Martian dust collection." The dreamscape was a feverish blur of activity, numbers and colors melding into a digital symphony that seemed forever on the brink of disaster. It was less a well-oiled machine and more a precarious house of cards, built on the hope that if they didn't look at it wrong, it might not collapse. "Okay," Solace said, pulling himself away from the hypnotic mess. "We've got the potential for a big boom. Now what?" "Well," Yuri said, straightening up, wiping his hands on a rag that looked more like a biohazard, "I was thinking if we can't scare them off with our charming personalities, we distract them with something a bit more explosive." "Big boom equals big distraction," Solace nodded. "But it's got to be just big enough." "Right, not too big," Yuri agreed. "Don't want to end up as space debris." Quinn's voice cut in, tired but determined. "Listen, we've got a potential weak point in the alien formation. If we hit it right, we might just buy ourselves some time. Maybe enough to slip by or regroup." Solace thought about that, a flicker of hope mingling with the usual dread. "Okay, so we make a big enough racket to get their attention, but not so much that we blow ourselves to kingdom come. Simple enough," Yuri snorted. "Yeah, just a casual day in the life. You want fries with that?" "Only if they are not from the space rations," Solace replied. "I'm not sure my stomach could handle another round of mystery meal." "All right, enough chit-chat," Quinn interrupted. "You two peacocks ready to strut your stuff or what?" Solace chuckled despite himself. "You know it. Let's mess up their day." The plan, if you could call it that, was the kind of thing that would make any self-respecting strategist weep. Lure them in, hit them where it hurts, and pray to every god in the cosmos that something goes right. You know, standard operating procedure. Yuri hefted the flux recalibrator like it was the Holy Grail. "Let's hope this thing is as impressive as it looks," he said, eyeing the glowing device. "Well, it's got more personality than half the people here," Solace quipped. With one last shared glance, they moved out, leaving the relative safety of their makeshift lab behind. The corridor loomed ahead, each step echoing with the weight of what they were about to attempt. Solace felt the familiar churn of anxiety in his gut, but he pushed it down, focusing instead on the task at hand. "Hey," Yuri said, breaking the silence as they walked. "How come it's always us doing the dirty work?" "Because we're too stubborn to roll over and die," Solace replied. "And you like playing with things that explode." Touché. They reached the end of the corridor, pausing before the door that led to Mars' unforgiving surface. Beyond it was the alien flotilla, a nightmare of dark shapes and shadows moving inexorably closer. "Last chance to back out," Yuri offered, though his grin suggested he already knew the answer. "Back out to what?" "A comfy chair in the middle of an alien invasion," Solace replied, pulling on his helmet. "No thanks, I'm all in." "Good. I'd hate to have to find a new partner in crime." "You're stuck with me," Solace said. "For better or worse." With a nod, Yuri punched the door control and it slid open with a hiss of pressurized air, revealing the Martian landscape in all its desolate glory. The sunrise was as disappointing as ever, casting a pale, sickly light over the red wasteland. "Remind me to file a complaint about the lack of sunshine," Yuri remarked, stepping onto the dusty ground. "Sure, I'll put it on the list," Solace said, following him. Right after survive alien onslaught. The alien flotillas were closer now, their dark hulls casting ominous shadows over the red planet. Each one bristled with weapons and unknowable technology, a testament to their relentless efficiency. It was enough to make even the most battle-hardened soldier break into a cold sweat. "Okay," Yuri said, checking the recalibrator one last time. "Let's find ourselves a nice cozy spot to set off a little fireworks show." "You make it sound so easy," Solace replied, scanning the horizon for the perfect location. "Hey, if this doesn't work, at least we'll go out with a bang," Solace smirked. Always the optimist. They moved quickly, the Martian dust swirling around their feet, a constant reminder of the planet's inhospitable nature. It clung to everything, a gritty second skin that seemed intent on making their lives as uncomfortable as possible. "Here," Solace said, spotting a small rise that provided a decent vantage point. "This should do." Yuri nodded, setting the recalibrator down with a care usually reserved for handling high explosives, which, Solace supposed, was more or less what they were doing. "All right, let's rig this baby and make like a tree," Yuri said, hands already a blur of motion. Solace kept watch, his eyes flicking constantly between the recalibrator and the approaching flotillas. "We've got company," he muttered, noting the change in their formation. "Great," Yuri muttered, not looking up. "Tell them we're closed for business." The recalibrator began to hum with power, its glow intensifying. Solace felt the hair on his arm stand up, a primal reaction to the energy building in the air. "That's not ominous at all," he said, trying to ignore the creeping sense of unease. "Hey, as long as it doesn't start talking, we're golden," Yuri replied. "Almost done here." The alien ships were closer now, the ground vibrating with their approach. Solace felt the familiar knot of fear tighten in his chest, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. "All right, she's set," Yuri announced, stepping back. "Let's get the hell out of Dodge." Solace didn't need to be told twice. They turned and ran, the Martian landscape blurring around them, each step a race against time. Behind them, the recalibrator continued to hum, its light casting long shadows across the ground. "Hope this works," Solace said, breathless as they sprinted toward safety. "Don't worry," Yuri replied, equally winded. "If it doesn't, we won't be around to complain." They dove behind a rocky outcrop just as the recalibrator went off, a blinding flash followed by an earth-shaking roar. Solace felt the shockwave pass over them, a wall of heat and force that rattled his teeth and left his ears ringing. "Wow," Yuri said, peeking over the rock. "Now that's what I call a distraction." The alien formation was in disarray, the explosion having thrown them into chaos. Ships veered off course, colliding with one another or spiraling out of control. "Looks like it worked," Solace said, trying to catch his breath. "Yeah," Yuri agreed, a note of triumph in his voice. "But we should probably keep moving before they figure out where that came from." Solace nodded, rising to his feet with a grim sense of satisfaction. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a spark of hope in a sea of despair. "Come on," he said, clapping Yuri on the shoulder. "Let's go mess up their day a little more." Together, they moved on, ready to face whatever came next with the grim determination of men who had nothing left to lose. In a universe that seemed intent on breaking them, they stood defiant, a testament to human ingenuity and the sheer bloody-mindedness that refused to let them lie down and die. And for the first time in a long time, Solace felt a flicker of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, they might come out of this alive. The Martian dust had barely settled from their impromptu fireworks display when Dr. Finton Solace and Yuri Pricey Harlan found themselves diving back into the fray. The alien flotillas quivered like a beast hit in its soft underbelly, and there was no time to sit around admiring the chaos they had wrought. "Well, that worked better than expected," Solace said, brushing dust off his cracked helmet. "It didn't help much. Mars had a way of making everything look like it was designed by a toddler with a red crayon and a grudge against cleanliness." "Yeah, maybe we should quit alien slaying and start a light show business," Yuri quipped, his voice crackling over the comms with the sound of static and barely contained excitement. "Right after we invent a reliable toaster," Solace replied. "Now let's get back before we become the main course in an alien buffet." They half ran, half stumbled back to their makeshift lab, the Martian landscape flashing by in shades of rust and regret. The lab was still standing, by some minor miracle of engineering and dumb luck. Quinn's voice cut in over the comms, dripping with the usual amount of sarcasm. "Back already. I was just about to start the funeral arrangements." "Save your breath," Solace said, already working on the holographic panel, which flickered between useless abstractions and less useless abstractions. "We're not dead yet, though I'm sure you'll love to gloat when we are. You're just making it harder for me to collect on that life insurance policy," Quinn deadpanned. "Keep waiting." "We're full of surprises," Yuri said, while tinkering with a panel that looked more like a spaghetti monster of wires than a piece of advanced technology. "Yeah, surprises," Solace muttered, resynchronizing the dreamscape technology. "More like what doesn't kill us better start running." The Xylith formation was now a mess of confusion and chaos, ships struggling to regain order. It was like watching a toddler try to assemble IKEA furniture, and for the first time in ages, Solace felt a real surge of optimism. It was the kind of hope you didn't want to examine too closely in case it crumbled under the scrutiny. "All right, here's the plan," Solace said, never one to let a good moment go unpunished by reason. "We've got them scattered, but they'll regroup fast. We need to deploy the dreamscape tech and make sure it hits them where it hurts." "You sure that rig won't blow up in our faces?" Yuri asked, though the glint in his eye showed he was more excited than concerned. "Define sure," Solace replied, fingers dancing over the holographic buttons with the reckless abandon of someone who's given up on the idea of a long retirement. "Not dying sounds good to me," Yuri said, sparking up another wire that smelled suspiciously of burnt toast. "And hey, if it blows up, at least we'll go out knowing we tried something stupid." "High stakes," Solace said, adjusting his helmet. "But nobody ever won a war by dying for their side. You win by making the other poor bastards die for theirs." The dreamscape was a mess of input and output, a digital web of possibilities and probabilities that functioned more like a teenager's bedroom than an advanced piece of technology. But it was their only shot at tipping the scales in this cosmic bar fight. Quinn's voice buzzed in again, more serious this time. "Got an update. The Xylith are splitting into two groups. One circling around. Could be a flank, could be a retreat." "Let's make it a retreat," Solace said, knowing full well that was easier said than done. "Ready when you are," Yuri said, the flux recalibrator now humming with a life of its own. Solace took a deep breath, fingers poised over the activation switch. This was it, the moment where everything could either go spectacularly right or catastrophically wrong. "Let's show these aliens what happens when you mess with humans." With a flick of his wrist, Solace activated the dreamscape. The room filled with a low rumble, not unlike the sound of a distant storm approaching. The holographic panel lit up, a chaotic dance of numbers and colors that somehow found meaning in the madness. Outside, the Martian sky crackled with energy. The dreamscape had connected with the recalibrator, sending a wave of electromagnetic interference toward the disoriented alien ships. "What's happening?" Quinn asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and dread. "Just a little neural overload," Solace replied, watching the alien flotillas as they began to stutter and stall, their systems overwhelmed by the unexpected digital assault. "We're overclocking their brains. They won't know what hit him." "Huh, take that, you tentacled bastards," Yuri shouted, more to himself than anyone else. The alien ships were now floundering, some spiraling off into the void, others colliding in a flurry of sparks and debris. The sheer absurdity of human ingenuity had caught them off guard, and they struggled to adapt to the chaos that had been unleashed. "Looks like they're backing off," Quinn said, disbelief tinging her voice as she monitored the feed. "I don't think they were expecting us to fight dirty." "Desperation breeds creativity," Solace said, watching with satisfaction as the alien formation broke apart. "And we're the most desperate sons of bitches in the galaxy. Well, maybe next time they'll think twice before picking a fight with a couple of grease monkeys," Yuri added, a wide grin plastered on his face. The alien ships were retreating now, the remaining vessels limping away into the darkness of space. It was a sight Solace hadn't dared to hope for, and yet here it was. Victory snatched from the jaws of defeat through sheer stubborn genius. "Looks like we did it," Solace said, feeling the tension in his shoulders finally start to ease. "We actually pulled it off." "Yeah, well, don't go patting yourself on the back too hard," Quinn cautioned. "They'll be back and they'll be pissed." "Let them come," Yuri said, arms crossed, surveying the aftermath. "We'll be ready." For the first time since this whole mess started, Solace allowed himself to smile. It was a small thing, but it was there, a flicker of warmth in the cold, indifferent cosmos. He looked around at the makeshift lab, the cracked helmet, the sparking wires, the eternal red dust that clung to everything. This was home, for better or worse, and they'd just proven that humans could hold their own even at the edge of extinction. "Let's get back to work," Solace said, clapping Yuri on the back. "We've still got a planet to save." As they turned back to the equipment, ready to prepare for whatever came next, Solace felt a quiet sense of pride. This wasn't the glamorous life he'd once imagined, but it was his, and he was damn proud of it. And maybe, just maybe, they'd live to see another disappointing Martian sunrise. But for now, there was work to be done, and Solace was determined to do it with the same irreverent, stubborn resilience that had gotten them this far. Because in the end, that's what it meant to be human, a refusal to quit, no matter how bleak things looked. With a final, defiant glance at the retreating alien ships, Solace set to work. There was a future to build, and he had every intention of being part of it, even if it meant doing things the hard way, one misstep at a time. The dust had barely begun to settle on this latest cosmic debacle, and already the makeshift lab was buzzing with the kind of frenetic energy that only comes from narrowly avoiding death. "Doctor," Finton Solace ran a hand through his hair, which, like his patience, was thinning at an alarming rate. He leaned back against the lab's battered console, looking around at the ramshackle collection of equipment that had somehow managed to save their collective asses. It wasn't much to look at, much like Solace himself, but it was functional, again, much like Solace himself. "Well, that was a thing," Yuri Pricey Harlan said, still riding the adrenaline high of their unexpected victory. He grinned like a kid who just pulled off the world's biggest prank and was waiting for the delayed reaction of the adults in the room, who in this metaphor were presumably the aliens. "Think they'll give us a medal for that?" "Yeah, sure," Solace replied, voice dripping with sarcasm. "In the form of a Martian-sized crater with our names on it." "Ah, the prestigious thanks for not dying award," Yuri quipped. "Been waiting my whole life for one of those." Quinn's voice crackled through the comms, finally clear of static, which was more than could be said for her attitude. "You two smug bastards done patting yourselves on the back. Because I'd like to remind everyone that pissed-off aliens tend to come back angrier and more well-armed." "Don't worry, Quinn," Solace said. "Your pessimism is like a warm blanket to me in this cold, heartless universe." "Glad to be of service," she shot back, her wit as sharp as ever. "Now, how about we talk repercussions? You know, those things that come after you stick your hand in a hornet's nest," Solace sighed. Quinn was right, as she annoyingly often was. They'd managed to fend off the Xylith this time, but it wasn't a permanent solution. More of a we'll deal with it later kind of approach, which had certainly never backfired on anyone ever. The ramifications were as vast as the Martian landscape outside. The dreamscape technology had worked, but now it was out there. Anyone who managed to get their grubby little hands on it could replicate what they'd done, or worse. That was a thought more terrifying than a malfunctioning flux recalibrator. Okay, Solace said, raising a hand to stave off further snark from Quinn. We need to secure the dreamscape tech. Last thing we need is it getting into the wrong hands. Or any hands, really, Yuri added, the humor finally draining out of his tone as the reality of the situation hit home. What's stopping someone else from doing what we just did? But, with more malice and less accidental heroics. Nothing, Solace replied, rubbing his temples as if that might somehow massage a solution out of his brain. Absolutely nothing. Well, at least we're consistent, Yuri said, the grin back in place, always leaving a trail of chaos in our wake. Quinn's voice was all business as it crackled back to life. We're going to need to think about alliances. Maybe the folks on Europa can help. They've got resources and they're not neck-deep in Martian dust. Ah, Europa. The cushy research station where the hardest decision anyone had to make was whether to have their coffee black or with a hint of synthetic cream. They'll help all right, Solace muttered. Help themselves to the tech as soon as they figure out how to reverse engineer it. Same goes for any other so-called ally. An uncomfortable silence settled over the lab, broken only by the occasional spark from the flux recalibrator. Trust was a rare commodity, and right now they were all but bankrupt. Guess it's up to us then, Yuri said, breaking the silence with a shrug. We built it, we broke it. Now we fix it. You say that like we didn't just wing it the whole way through, Solace pointed out. Winging it is basically our brand, Yuri said with a wink. And look at where it's gotten us. Right at the top of the list of people aliens want to murder. Achieving the dream, Solace said dryly before pushing himself off the console. All right, no sense moping about. We need to hunker down, improve the tech, make it so nobody else can use it against us, or anyone else. We're gonna need a bigger lab, Yuri observed, looking around at the cramped space that barely contained their current equipment, let alone anything new. Yeah, maybe one that doesn't look like it might collapse if I sneeze too hard, Solace agreed. Quinn cut in, her sarcasm dialed back to reveal a rare moment of sincerity. Look, it's not just about bigger labs or better tech. It's about trust. We've got to work with people we can count on because this isn't a one-lab job, touching, Yuri said, clasping a hand to his chest in mock appreciation. But who exactly are we trusting? The aliens. Because they're not exactly in a sharing mood. No, the aliens are right out, Solace agreed, a sardonic edge to his voice. But maybe we start small, expand our circle from people we know. Like Quinn? Yuri asked. Quinn's more of a frenemy, Solace replied, which earned him a burst of static that he could have sworn was laughter. Call me whatever you like as long as it's not late for dinner, Quinn said. I'm in. It was a start. A flimsy, cobbled-together start, but a start nonetheless. They had no idea if the Xylith would regroup and attack again, if Europa would swoop in with promises of cooperation only to turn on them, or if the dreamscape tech would implode in a spectacular display of human error. But they'd faced long odds before, and they'd do it again. Solace looked over at Yuri, then up at the Martian sky, which was beginning to darken with the approach of another disappointing sunset. You ready to save the day again tomorrow? Yuri's grin was infectious. Hell, I was born ready. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? Famous last words, Solace muttered, but he couldn't help but smile. Because that was the thing about humanity, they never knew when to quit. The two men set to work, side by side, like a couple of mad scientists with more ambition than sense. They'd take the small victories, clutch at whatever hope they could, and keep fighting. Because that's what you did when the universe was intent on grinding you down. You pushed back. They'd secured a future here on Mars, carved out a little piece of survival in a galaxy that seemed hell-bent on exterminating them. And maybe, just maybe, they'd figure out where to go from here, how to take what they'd built and make something more of it. But for now, they'd keep tinkering, keep plotting, keep hoping that tomorrow they'd be alive to see another day. Because that was the human way. Stubborn, irreverent, endlessly inventive. And in the end, that just might be enough. As the Martian night settled in, Solace and Yuri worked under the dim lights of the lab. They had a long road ahead, but they weren't alone. They had each other, a weird camaraderie born of shared danger and mutual respect. And as long as they had that, they'd keep going, keep fighting, keep living. Because sometimes, in a universe determined to break you, just surviving was the greatest victory of all. With a final shared look and a nod, they dove back into the chaos, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. They were alive, they were human, and they'd be damned if they let anyone, or anything, take that away from them.